welcome. Today is the second Saturday in January, and all month long I've been doing something called Inner Child January. And basically it's mostly just a prompt list, but we're learning a little bit about our inner child and how to connect to our inner child to be more creative. There's a lot of reasons you might want to connect with your inner child as far as like pertaining to your whole life. But I'm an artist, and so I'm interested in how connecting with your inner child can help you to create a more sustainable, more authentic, and a more pleasurable art practice. So today we're doing a non-dominant hand exercise. I will talk a little bit more about that in a second, but I just wanted to put out a disclaimer. Hi guys, welcome. So this is a non-dominant hand exercise. So the disclaimer is I'm a painter, I'm an artist. I got my degree in art, so I'm not a psychiatrist or psychologist. I've read some books. I've worked with a therapist for, I think I'm going on 7 years now. But I'm keeping this very superficial and very light and not very in-depth because I'm not I'm not a therapist. So we have 2 prompt questions that we're going to do. And if you're watching at home, I'm going to talk for a little bit, but in the meantime, get any kind of paints or collage work or anything you'd like to use. It's non-dominant hand, so you can think like either painting with your non-dominant hand, drawing with your non-dominant hand. If you would like to write, you can get a pencil and paper. I have watercolors. I know I'm an acrylic painter, but I used to paint with a lot of watercolor, and I think I was thinking and meditating this morning, and I think that feels the most authentic to me because it's going to be with my non-dominant hand, so it's going to look really like brushy and stuff, and so I just watercolor felt right. But if you like to paint with oils or acrylics, go ahead. I'm just painting in my journal, so it's just regular journal paper, and I have a glass of water and some brushes, and I'm going to mostly use ink and watercolor. Really excited about that. But yeah, grab whatever materials you'd like. And yeah, just for everyone who's joining, it's an exercise for Inner Child January. So if you've been participating, this is just, I'm anchoring Inner Child January with a live every Saturday. Last Saturday I talked about my inner child journey. This Saturday we're doing non-dominant hand exercise. Next Saturday we're doing a meditation with my my therapist, and she's going to talk a little bit about healing and stuff like that just from her. So anyways, yeah, make sure you gather your materials, whatever you like. Again, it can be acrylic, watercolor, pen and paper. It doesn't have to be fancy. You're not going to show it to anyone. Just whatever feels right for you. And while you're gathering those supplies and everyone's coming in, I thought I'd talk a little bit about how I discovered non-dominant hand like therapy. So first of all, I didn't know it was a therapy. In August of 2018, I was in a car crash, and I'm fine now, but I broke my radius and a bone in my thumb, and it was in my right hand, and I'm right-handed. And anyways, I had a cast on. I couldn't paint, and it was right when I was starting to get, my practice was really taking off. A lot of good things were happening for me. I was starting to make money with my art, and then all of a sudden I broke my arm, and the doctor said, okay, I think he said 3 to 6 months with no right hand, and it terrified me, understandably, right? And I remember I was sad for a little bit. I kind of had, a pity party. I really felt my emotions. And then I said, okay, you know what? I still want to paint even if I don't make a good product. And so I went to like Michael's or something, and I got 2 really large canvases and larger brushes. And I said, you know what? I'm going to use bigger muscle groups, and I'll just see what I make. And if it's abstract, that's fine. I just want to be in my studio painting still. And so I did. I painted with my left hand, and it was really, really therapeutic. I didn't know why, but I remember going into my studio with no expectation for myself. With my right hand, there was all of this pressure, like in my right hand, not physically, like mentally and emotionally, that I had gone to art school, that I had a practice to uphold, and that I had to paint in a way that reflected that. There was just a lot of expectation and pressure that I had put on myself. And with my left hand, it was very much the opposite. I had no expectations and no pressure, and I sort of allowed myself to create in a way that I gave myself a lot of permission to make whatever I wanted, and it was very detached from the product. It was just, I missed having time in the studio, and so that was all that I was using my non-dominant hand for. And it freed up my practice, it freed up my brush strokes. And I remember talking to my therapist about it and being like, man, I knew I was gonna have to learn a lesson from this car accident, but like, I've really discovered a lot of stuff about my creative practice from breaking my dominant hand. And she showed me a bunch of research about how non-dominant hand therapy is really good for people who are trying to heal an inner child wound. And there's actually some science behind when you paint with your non-dominant hand, you're accessing a different part of your brain that's been less developed and has less attachment to ego. Obviously, there's a more scientific way of describing that, but again, I can't reiterate enough how I'm not a psychologist, I'm an artist. But there's a lot of science to it, and I thought it was really interesting because I did this kind of intuitively, and I was blown away when I read all the research behind it. And you can go to YouTube or Google, and there's people who do non-dominant hand exercises as a way to resolve childhood trauma or just become more in touch with their inner child. And I thought it was really interesting. So whenever I decided to put together Inner Child January, one of the ideas I had was to walk you guys through that exercise and share what I learned with you guys. So that's why we're here today. If you're just tuning in, we're doing a left-handed or non-dominant hand, it's my left hand, but non-dominant hand exercise. I have watercolors. You can use acrylic, you can use oil, you can use pen and paper. It doesn't have to be fancy. But I have 2 prompts, and we're going to just draw and paint and see what comes up. Make sure you listen to your body, and if this feels a little bit like irritating or just like you're finding a lot of resistance, feel free to step back and just watch and maybe do it later. No pressure. We're just I'm not expecting to make anything amazing. I'm very much right-handed, so but yeah, anyways, thank you for being here. I'm going to flip you guys up on my tripod, and we're going to get started with the exercise. So thanks for being here. Let's see. So as you can see on here, I just have my water, my brushes, and some watercolor paints. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. You can raid your kids' supplies and just use a Crayola watercolor set if you want. But my first prompt, I'm just gonna go over the prompts now, is a time I felt loved, happy, and safe. So we're going to draw. If you are joining in and you're not much of an artist, but you're interested, you can always write words with your left hand if that feels best for you. Again, there's no right, there's no wrong. Listen to whatever feels best for you. But we're going to start with a time we felt loved, happy, and safe. And then the second prompt, I don't know if you guys can read it, is what does my dream practice look like? And so what we're hoping here is that we can access a different part of our brain with our non-dominant hand that might give us some insight. It might affirm something we already think, but we're just gonna listen and play. And again, there's no expectation. Your non-dominant hand is probably gonna look different than your dominant hand, and that's 100% okay. So let's see. For me, I was thinking about it before I hopped on here, because it really took me some time to find a memory that I really enjoyed. I'm starting with my dominant hand, holy cow. You're supposed to paint with your non-dominant hand, sorry. But the memory that kind of came to mind was when I was a little kid. My mom was a great gardener. We never had a lot of space, but she always planted tomatoes and all kinds of stuff. And there was a couple years when I was a little kid where we had a backyard. We had a house with a backyard, and my mom planted a garden. And I remember, because I adored my mom, that I wanted to plant something also. And so she let me pick out from the seed catalog some seeds, and I planted something called a pickle garden. And basically it was just a little garden that I dug up myself. I remember I dug the hole, and I put topsoil in, and I put rocks around the perimeter to keep weeds out. And it was just a garden that had cucumber, I think it had garlic, and it had dill. And I planted it all together, and at the end of the summer I was able to harvest it, and we made pickles. And it was one of my favorite memories. because it was a way to connect with my mom. And I remember that I felt really empowered because I was able to see my own hard work pay off. And for me, it's just a really pleasant memory I have. So if you're wondering like the process, this definitely isn't a tutorial. I remember in college, I took a figure drawing class, and we took sponges and charcoal that we would wet, and it basically was like a black and white watercolor. And we used to take the sponge and outline our model's figure and then go in and draw and find the model's form. And I remember just really liking that. So there's not a whole lot of paint whatever you like, but this is kind of what the style I'm going for. So I'm giving myself kind of a background, and I'm gonna draw maybe like a garlic and a dill pickle, and just see what comes up. This is so tough because I wish I could see what you guys were drawing. But we're going slow and we're not judging. I remember when I first started painting with my non-dominant hand, really liking and thinking it was charming, the like squiggly lines. So there's a garlic. Let's see. Maybe we'll do a cucumber vine. I think we planted the little, what were they? The pickling cucumbers, the little ones. To this day, those are still my favorites. But if you're just joining in and you're like, what on earth is going on here? I am doing a non-dominant hand painting, or not, it's a watercolor base, and now I'm drawing, but as a way to connect with inner child. I broke my right hand in a car accident a few years ago, and I started doing some left hand work, and it was really fun and therapeutic. So let's see, that looks more like a potato, but again, remember, we don't judge our left hand, we just go with it. Let's see, dill would be kind of hard. Just do some sprigs. And you can use a reference photo if you'd like, or you can just freehand out of your imagination. Again, there's no right or wrong. Just doing another garlic over here. Yeah. So yeah, that's pretty good. Obviously, I think if you were doing this on your own, you would want to spend more time. I did that pretty quick. But I'm just sort of at this point, again, I'm not judging. It's always a little hard to do when you like have people watching, but if you're on your own and you're watching this, you really need to kind of sense what, if you're judging, where there's resistance, if you're finding unexpected joy, perhaps, in this whole process. Something that you could do that's really helpful is, whichever hand, maybe write down what you're feeling and just tap into that, and see if there's anything that comes up. So that was my memory. And then I'm going to move on. You guys can keep doing this if you'd like, but I'm going to go ahead and move on to what does my dream practice look like? And so I didn't really figure out what I was going to draw, so I'm doing this pretty spontaneous. But again, I'm just going to start with a color. I'm just going to start with a couple of my favorite colors with my non-dominant hand. I'm going right in with magenta. And it can be literal or it can be abstract, be a combination of the two. Maybe you do watercolor and you write text on top. There's really no right or wrong answer here. Maybe we even take a second to admire our dominant hand, as we really seem to struggle with our left hand. One thing is you can find yourself being really discouraged with even your dominant hand, saying like, oh, I wish I was a better artist, I wish I had better control. And even just the act of using your other hand can remind you how much wisdom and knowledge you actually have in your dominant hand, and maybe you can walk away a little bit more grateful for the insight that you've cultivated in your dominant hand, because it's so contrast with your your non-dominant hand. At least that's what I'm feeling right now. So I went in with like a blue, looks like a bit of an ultramarine. Okay. Let's see, I'm going to just dab this so I can draw on top. I think if I was by myself and not filming, I'd probably just let it dry. But in the meantime, let's see. And when I think about my ideal practice, let's see. I think I started kind of tapping into some stuff by the fact that I started abstract. I think that's really interesting to observe. But let's see. I see natural sunlight. And I'm being kind of more literal here, but when I really tap into what I want out of a practice, I think I see sunlight. I see lots of color. I feel like this is like, for me, it's like landscape. So I'm in a location that has a lot of access to nature. Here's my easel. Maybe I'm even outside, who knows? Yeah. Again, I think if I was by myself, I would spend more time with both of these. But for me, this kind of feels good. This is interesting. I feel like I've set up a plein air setting. Maybe I need to go outside and paint more. But having a connection with like light and nature is like when I close my eyes and think about like what the inner child part of myself, or like when I say inner child, it's sort of, it's interchangeable with the idea of true self. At least that's what I've read in several books, and my psychiatrist, that's kind of what they're talking about. When you hear people say inner child and you're like, what is that? It's a connection with a truer, more authentic, less ego-driven part of yourself. But yeah, I think it's really interesting. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it around and see if I can find any questions. about this. And then at the end, I'm going to share a list of resources. And then when I repost this later, I'm probably going to post on YouTube. I'll have a link with the prompts and then with all of the resources. Again, I am a starting point if you're interested in this, but there's a lot more information out there that is from actual people who do this. Let's see if I can look through any questions. Hi, guys. Yeah. Oh, I hope some of you guys are. I know if you're doing this you're probably not typing out questions. I see some people saying that they can't draw with their left hand. That's actually kind of the purpose. Is so think about that statement. I can't draw with my left hand. So does that mean you can draw with your right hand? Like, what, deconstruct that a little bit. Technically, if you can, perhaps maybe you don't have, assuming you have your actual hands, right? You can make a line. It's just, do you not consider that play actual drawing? And what does it mean to have to hit a threshold that you consider drawing, right? When we say I can't draw with our left hand, unless there's a very valid way that you actually physically cannot hold a pencil or something, barring that, then you're just saying that the quality at which my non-dominant hand can produce doesn't meet my expectations. And what if we let go of that expectation and just did something that felt good and didn't say this is or is not drawing? It just was, right? We didn't label it or say I can't, or it's not good, or it's not right. I think even before I realized that non-dominant hand exercise was a way to access inner child, like when I said with my story that I just did it intuitively, letting go of the expectation and assuming that I could not meet my expectation and I couldn't draw with my left hand, and allowing myself to draw anyways, really was a very liberating and a very powerful moment for yourself. So if you find yourself saying things like, I can't draw with my left hand, maybe get rid of that thought and of can't, make something anyways, and then do the powerful move of saying, yes, this is worthy and this is valuable anyways. It's valuable because you spent time doing it, and it's valuable because I don't go to my 5-year-old or when he was 4 and 3 and really learning how to hold a pencil, and just because he was making scribbles, I didn't say to him, ooh, that's bad, you can't draw. I looked at him with love and said, wow, it's amazing that you spent time doing this. Honor that. If we told kids when they were little and scribbling that they can't draw and that's bad, we'd have 100th of the artists we have in the world today. You have to imagine that you can grow and evolve, and that time spent making is valid just by itself, regardless of what you make. But I understand. Let's see. I will take a picture if you want to see it afterwards. But I know, like, if you tap the chat, it's smaller if you're watching. Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Yeah. No, you guys are saying a lot of really encouraging things. I don't understand the second prompt. Do you mean was your ideal setting? It can be less literal than that. I started painting and colors sort of came up, and then I realized I was sort of painting a landscape. And so I think for me, it meant when I envision an ideal practice, where the practice is taking place is coming up for me, but it can be anything. It could be, for example, when I was thinking over this exercise, someone who maybe they only paint landscapes, very specific way, and all of a sudden they start playing and they're painting an animal and they're not really sure why. Ask yourself, is this because maybe you would like to paint animals, but because you've said that I'm not good enough to paint animals, or I don't have enough skill, you don't do it because you don't want to be embarrassed of trying in front of people, or trying to paint something and falling short. That makes you uncomfortable. If your ideal practice looks like a different either a different medium or a different subject matter, maybe that means that your ideal practice is more expansive than what you have now and includes landscapes and animals, but there's resistance there because, going back to that initial point, we think we can't draw animals, right? So it does not have to be literal. None of this is literal. There's no right or wrong, but I think it's really interesting to see what comes up, especially when you aren't clicking into your dominant hand and going ahead and doing stuff that gets a lot of external praise, and you paint something with your non-dominant hand, and you're not going to have a good finished product, right? What comes up there? So yes, it does not have to be literal. Let's see. Yeah, the product. So I this is just like, I've had this since maybe I was in high school, but this is just a little watercolor, like random dinky craft store brush. It's so old that the wood's all peeled off, but these brushes, let's see, it's like Qualita round brushes, I'm not sure. And then these paints are just, I think the brand is called Kai. It's kind of a middle of the road brand. And I've had this for years. But when I first started painting watercolors on this account, I just used a Crayola, the 12 pack. They have some colors that are actually pretty good. But anyways, yeah, it can be with anything. Let's see. It's okay to start the prompt late, absolutely. I'm going to save this in its entirety. I'm going to probably upload it to YouTube, and then I'm going to link the resources and everything in the bio. So if you'd like to save this for later, I went through kind of quick just because I didn't want to waste anyone's time. But yeah, I'll have the prompt saved somewhere else in its entirety. Okay, so I think I am going to talk a little bit about the resources and then log off. So again, I'm an artist. I have no training in any of this. This is just stuff I've gone through. But if you're interested in learning more about inner child healing, anything like that, I'm sharing some stuff that I found really helpful. So 2 Instagram accounts to follow is the holistic psychologist. Her name is Dr. Lee LaPera. Again, I will link these somewhere in their entirety. Another Instagram account that's great is the Somatic Witch. It's just at Somatic Witch. Her name is Andrea Glick, and she's also great. And then I have a bunch of books that I think are really helpful. I listen to a lot of them as audibles, but I have a couple here with me. But one of them is Recovery of Your Inner Child, and it's by Lucia. Oh gosh, that's a really hard last name. I'll tell you what, I'll just hold it up. And this is a pretty good one. You can get it off like thrift books, and I've actually seen this in a thrift store before, so I think it's a fairly common book. But that one is really the go-to for inner child work. Another really good one that I listened to on Audible is called It Didn't Start With You by Mark Wolynn, Wollynn. And that one's a really good one, talking about inherited trauma and like childhood. It's a really good book. Let's see, another one that's a little less inner child and more just like linear passed down traumas and stuff like that is called My Grandmother's Hands by Resmaa. Oh gosh, I have the book here. Let's see, just read that guy. And again, I will put a list where all these are linked, but that one's really good, a really, really good read. The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. That one, I'm sure a lot of people, I've seen that at thrift stores all the time, but that's a really common one. And then the last one is Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents. And that one is more if you know that there's kind of, if you know that there's trauma or like neglect in your past or your parents' past and you're curious about that, that's a really good one. And they talk a lot about inner child and how meeting those needs is kind of the crux to a lot of mental and emotional health. But those are kind of the resources that I've read and I think are really helpful and that have helped me in my journey. And of course, I can't say enough about actually seeing someone who's trained and getting their input and advice if it's accessible to you. But yeah, that was really fun. Like I said, I'm going to save this in its entirety, and I'll have the prompts there. Also, if you have alone time today or tomorrow or whenever, I encourage you going over the prompts again and really seeing what comes up. But yeah, that was really fun. I think I'm going to hop off now and enjoy the rest of your Saturday. Thank you so much for being here. Take care of yourself. Thanks, guys.